The desert stretched endlessly beneath a sky the color of rusted steel. Dust spiraled across the cracked highway, dancing briefly before vanishing into stillness. Beneath this quiet expanse, a man labored beneath the hood of a battered pickup, the engine's coughing echoes swallowed by the wind. His name was Jack Remy, 40, lean, weathered by sun and time. His hands, calloused and stained, moved with a practiced calm that came only from years spent mending what others deemed unsalvageable. Once, he had worn a different uniform. Not denim stained with grease, but regulation blue, crisp with purpose. He had worked in top-tier aerospace hangars, surrounded by the cutting edge of American aviation. Now, he crouched beside rust and rot, a forgotten name in a forgotten town. His garage stood on the outskirts of a dying desert town, flanked by rusted tractors, worn-out engines, and the bones of cars that would never run again. The sign above the entrance, "Remy's Repair," hung crooked, one side chained loosely, the other anchored by hope. Inside the small trailer he called home, his daughter, Emma, stirred a pot of instant oatmeal. At 14, she'd inherited her father's sharp mind and quiet resilience. Her clothes were patched, her shoes 2 sizes too big, but she carried herself with the calm certainty of someone who knew life had already tested her. She peered through the smudged window, watching Jack with a mix of admiration and concern. He hadn't always been like this, tired, hunched, half-buried in rust. Once, her father's name had been whispered in high-clearance circles. He had designed diagnostic systems for the Air Force's most ambitious engine prototypes. But that was before he spoke up. Before he exposed the manufacturer for cutting corners on compressor blades for the F-16 Falcon series. Before he was blacklisted and erased. Emma didn't know all the details, only that her father used to shine in places where his hands didn't tremble, where people listened when he spoke. These days, he fixed farm trucks and irrigation pumps for people who paid with casseroles and promises. "Dad," Emma called from the doorway. "Coffee's ready." He wiped his hands on a rag that had seen better days, took the cup she offered, and gave her a tired smile. "Thanks, kiddo." She watched him drink. The lines around his eyes had deepened in recent months. The weight of unpaid bills and silent phones clung to him like dust. Still, every morning, he opened the garage, hoping one day something better would roll through. That day, something did. They heard the sound long before they saw the convoy. A deep, grinding growl of diesel engines and military wheels pressing against cracked asphalt. Jack stepped out into the sun, shielding his eyes. Emma joined him. Together, they watched as 3 Air Force trucks rumbled past, towing behind them a burned, battered jet. An F-16 Falcon, its tail scorched, its undercarriage dragging. It looked as though it had fallen from the sky and refused to die. Behind it, soldiers and technicians poured out of the trucks, inspecting the damage with cold, professional detachment. One man stood apart from the rest, broad shoulders, silver hair, dark glasses. A general. Jack recognized the aircraft immediately. Block 30 series. General Electric engine. The same series that had triggered the storm that ended his career. "What are they doing here?" Emma asked. Jack didn't answer at first. His gaze was locked on the jet, his jaw clenched. "Emergency landing, maybe," he said finally. "That engine, she's fried. Think you could fix it?" He chuckled dryly. "Not without a miracle." Later that afternoon, as Jack loaded scrap into his truck, a local mechanic stopped by with news. "They've been calling in techs all morning. None of them can get that bird to wake up. Engine's dead. Military's calling it a total loss." Jack raised an eyebrow but said nothing. The idea pulled at him like a ghost. That engine, damaged as it was speaking his language. He could feel it in his bones, the way a musician senses a note out of tune. By dusk, he stood at the edge of the airfield, drawn by instinct more than intention. The soldiers had gathered around the jet, voices raised, frustration thick in the air. Jack watched silently until one of them noticed him. "You lost, old man?" a young sergeant asked. Jack didn't flinch. "Just looking." The general turned. His gaze settled on Jack like a weight. Something funny? Jack stepped forward. No, sir. I used to work on those engines. The men laughed. The general's expression didn't change. You don't say. I know that model. GF-110. Those turbine fans, if they overheat and crack near the stator, you'll lose all compression. That happen here? A moment of silence. The general's interest sharpened. You're telling me you can fix it? I'm saying it's not impossible. The laughter returned, louder this time. The general smirked. You've got guts, grease monkey. Tell you what, fix that engine, make it fly, and I'll make sure the Pentagon hears your name again. Hell, I'll even eat my bars if you pull it off. Jack's eyes narrowed. He glanced at Emma, who had walked up behind him. She looked at him with something he hadn't seen in a long time, hope. I accept, he said. The crowd fell quiet. You've got 10 days, the general said. After that, she goes to the scrapyard. Jack stepped closer to the jet, his hand brushing the fuselage like he was greeting an old friend. Beneath the soot and twisted metal, he could feel the heartbeat of something that wasn't ready to die. That night, Emma found him sitting alone in the hangar. She brought 2 sandwiches and a flashlight, placing them beside him without a word. Jack stared at the jet, its silhouette black against the moonlight. I don't know if I can do it, he whispered. Emma sat beside him. I do. He turned to her. In her face, he saw everything he'd lost, and everything he still had. And in that moment, for the first time in years, Jack Remy let himself believe. Jack stood alone in the hangar's half-light, the F-16 looming over him like a sleeping beast. Its burned paint and scorched tail looked even worse up close. Sand had crept into every crevice, and its underbelly wore the scars of a crash too violent to forget. The Air Force had delivered it with 3 rusted toolboxes, a single hydraulic lift, and an old manual already curling at the corners. Everything else, parts, diagnostics, even the support crew, was up to Jack. He paced slowly around the aircraft, his fingers tracing along its battered frame. The jet didn't intimidate him. What haunted him was what lay hidden beneath the metal, the ghost in the engine, the thing no one could diagnose, the failure everyone feared because it was invisible to scanners but lethal in the air. He'd seen it before. Years ago, a young pilot named Brooks had gone down because of it. And no one had listened when Jack said it was the faulty fan seals. Start small, he muttered, grabbing his flashlight and wrench. 1 bolt at a time. Emma arrived with a thermos of coffee and an armful of printouts she'd gathered from an old laptop. She dropped them gently on the workbench and watched her father slide beneath the belly of the aircraft. His boots stuck out, legs stiff, body still. I found a schematic from 2007, she said. Might help. It's not exact, but it's close. Jack slid out, squinting. Better than nothing. Print more if you can. I'll need a full component list. Emma nodded, then hesitated. Do you think they really meant it? About clearing your name? Jack looked past her toward the distant shape of the general's convoy, now just a blur of canvas and chrome under the desert sun. No. But that's not why I said yes. Then why? He paused, considering. Because for the first time in years, someone's giving me a chance. Doesn't matter if they're laughing while they do it. He returned to the engine. For hours he worked in silence. Bolts creaked. Metal groaned. The desert wind howled faintly through the hangar's busted vents. By midnight he had the cowling off. The engine core was a mess, carbon black scoring, signs of an uneven burn, and most telling of all, a subtle fracture running across the base of the 4th stage fan disc. There you are, he whispered. Hiding in plain sight. He took a photo, marked it, and logged the failure in a notebook already worn from years of exile. If he could rebuild the fan structure, isolate the vibration issue, and realign the compressor blades, he might bring the bird back to life. But the parts he needed weren't available in this ghost town. He'd have to improvise. The next morning, Jack rummaged through his own scrapyard, pulling pieces from wrecked cars, discarded turbines, even an old crop duster he'd kept for sentimental reasons.
Emma helped, dragging what she could and logging everything into a spreadsheet. Together, they crafted new blade molds from reinforced aluminum, welding and polishing late into the night. Still, setbacks came hard. A belt tore mid-spin on day 3. The makeshift actuator refused to sink. Emma burned her hand on the lathe. Jack's right shoulder locked up with pain he refused to acknowledge. But none of it stopped them. The general returned on the 4th day, stepping out of his Humvee with arms folded. He surveyed the cluttered workspace, the scattered tools, the jet half dismantled like some strange mechanical autopsy. "You know," he said, "this looks more like a scrapyard science experiment than a military repair bay." Jack didn't look up. "Then don't watch." The general smirked but stayed, arms still crossed. "Heard you used to work Falcon engines. Back when the Air Force still used the old test rigs." Jack tightened a bolt without answering. The general circled the jet. "Funny thing is, I pulled your file. Said you flagged a defect that didn't exist. Said you cost the government a $50 million contract and nearly tanked a supplier." Jack stood. "I flagged a defect that killed 3 pilots. That supplier cut costs. I didn't make that up." The general's face remained unreadable. "You want redemption. I get that. But don't expect miracles. This plane's got one chance." As the general turned to leave, Jack called after him. "It's not about redemption. It's about proving the truth never needed permission." Emma handed him a water bottle and waited until the general was out of earshot. "Was that smart?" "No," Jack said, wiping sweat from his brow. "But it was necessary." The days blurred into one another. Heatwaves rippled off the tarmac. Jack barely slept, stopping only to ice his shoulder or adjust the torque setting. Emma worked beside him, her hands as dirty as his, her eyes brighter with each small victory, a part sealed, a turbine humming, a control panel blinking to life. By the 7th day, they had a test ignition. The engine coughed, sputtered, then roared to half power before choking out in a puff of smoke. But for a brief moment, the sound of life filled the hangar again, and Jack stood beside his daughter, covered in soot, grinning like a man who'd just heard a heartbeat from the dead. "Think she'll fly?" Emma asked. Jack placed a hand on the jet's side. "She wants to." And for the first time in years, he truly believed it. The jet's engine hung suspended, half disassembled, like a fragile puzzle awaiting its final pieces. Jack tightened a clamp on the ignition harness, sweat trickling down his temple. The 8th day had come fast and hard. He had only 2 days left to make the engine roar to life again. His body ached from the non-stop labor, fingers sore and blistered, but his mind burned with clarity. Every screw turned, every wire rerouted, was a defiance of the past that tried to erase him. Emma sat cross-legged nearby, double-checking the voltage readings on an old analog multimeter Jack had trusted for decades. The numbers flickered slightly. "Something's off with the capacitor output," she murmured. Jack moved beside her, scanned the readings, and frowned. "That shouldn't be happening. We fixed the oscillation loop yesterday." "I thought so too." She looked up at him. "Want me to recheck the ground line?" "Do it. I'll pull the panel again." As she crawled under the fuselage, Jack returned to the power assembly junction. A knot formed in his stomach. Loose wiring. A poorly seated connector. He knew his work, and this wasn't his mistake. His fingers worked faster now, stripping back tape, checking pins, tracing the paths again. Then he saw it. One of the new thermal coils was swapped with an old, brittle one. The labels had been altered. It was a deliberate replacement. He stood frozen. "Emma," he called softly, not wanting his voice to echo. "Get up here." She appeared beside him, and he handed her the coil. "This isn't ours. It's not even rated for this model." Her eyes widened. "You think someone's tampering?" "I don't think," Jack said, voice flat. "I know." They exchanged a long, silent look. The only people with access were military personnel. Either someone didn't want that jet flying, or someone wanted Jack to fail. Emma lowered her voice. "Should we say something?" To who? Jack asked. The same people who laughed when I said I'd fix it. No one believes a mechanic over a uniform. No, we document everything. Quietly. Emma nodded, her jaw clenched. They spent the next 3 hours rechecking every component. Jack photographed each anomaly, mislabeled circuits, reverse polarities, even a tiny shard of glass lodged in a fuel injector. Sabotage, no doubt. Subtle. Lethal. If the plane had ignited in that state, it could have exploded on the test stand. The realization chilled him, but it also stoked something fiercer, determination. They wouldn't let him rise. But he was rising anyway. That night he barely slept. Every noise outside had him peering through the trailer window, flashlight in hand. He kept his tools locked in the garage and brought the most crucial parts inside, wrapping them in towels like relics. Emma stayed up too, trying not to show her fear. At dawn, Jack returned to the hangar. He worked more carefully now, triple-checking everything. If they were trying to break him, they'd find him unbreakable. By mid-morning, the new ignition system was in place. Emma had reprogrammed the diagnostic feedback loop using open-source code, saving them days of work. The test switch gleamed in her hand. You ready? She asked, standing beside the cockpit. Jack gave a cautious nod. Ignition in 3, 2, 1. The engine sputtered. Whined. Then with a sudden roar, it caught, a deep, aggressive sound that reverberated across the desert. Flames curled from the afterburner nozzle in a controlled burst. The entire jet shuddered on its struts, alive again. Emma whooped. Jack let out a shaky breath, resting a hand on the fuselage. That's it. She's breathing. They ran a 30-second test, just enough to confirm pressure balance and thrust stabilization. No leaks, no alarms, no errors. It was working. Against every odd, against every hidden hand trying to stop them, the plane was alive. As the roar faded, a slow clap echoed from the edge of the hangar. The general stepped into view, flanked by 2 officers. Impressive, he said. Didn't expect to see this bird growl again. Jack wiped his hands and nodded politely. She's got more to say. The general studied the jet, then turned to Jack. I heard there've been irregularities. Someone filed a report, misplaced tools, reverse connections. Jack's posture stiffened. Wasn't us. I didn't say it was. But someone wants this engine to fail. Badly. His tone darkened. That makes this political. And dangerous. Emma shifted closer to Jack. The general noticed, then continued. Your name's been whispered around the base. Some of my officers are getting nervous. You're making people look bad. Jack's voice was quiet but firm. If the truth makes people look bad, maybe they're standing in the wrong light. The general let a slow smile form. You ever think about coming back, Remy? I'm not finished here yet. The general nodded. You've got 1 day left. Test flights tomorrow morning. Make sure she's ready. After they left, Jack and Emma sat on a crate outside the hangar, watching the sky blush orange with the setting sun. The wind carried the faint scent of fuel and metal, but it felt oddly peaceful. Tomorrow's it, Emma whispered. Win or lose? Jack nodded slowly. No. Just truth or silence. She leaned against him, and he wrapped an arm around her shoulder. For a moment, neither of them spoke. In the shadows behind them, a figure watched from a distance, hidden near the stacks of scrap. Hands in pockets. Waiting. But not for long.